Ding.
Ticketing.
Most airlines are using electronic ticketing now.
Ticket tout.
Ticket tout.
Ticking.
Ticking.
Ticking off.
Ticking off.
Tickle.
Tickle.
Stop tickling me. Mummy, this blanket tickles.
Maisie's fur collar was tickling her neck. The kids would tickle pink to see you on TV. If I see something that tickles my fancy, I'm going to buy it.
I've got a tickle in my throat.
Ticklish.
Ticklish.
Handling awkward neighbours can be a ticklish business.
Tick-tock.
Tick-tock.
Ticky-tacky.
Ticky-tacky.
Tic-tac-toe.
Tic-tac-toe.
Tidal.
Tidal.
Tidal currents.
Tidal wave.
Tidal wave.
A tidal wave of crime.
Voters were swept away on a tidal wave of enthusiasm.
Tidbit.
Tidbit.
Juicy tidbits of hot news.
Tiddler.
Tiddler.
Tiddly.
Tiddly.
A tiddly little insect.
Tiddlywinks.
Tiddlywinks.
Tide.
Tide.
Is the tide going out or coming in?
We went for a walk and got cut off by the tide.
Strong tides make swimming dangerous. With the tide of public opinion against him, the president may lose.
It was their first major victory. The tide had turned. The tide of battle turned against the Mexican army.
The crisis prompted a rising tide of protest.
She swallowed back a tide of emotion. Efforts to stem the tide of hysteria caused by the shootings.
The tide of refugees flowing over the border. Could you lend me £10 to tide me over till next week?
Tide mark.
Tide mark.
Tide pool.
Tide pool.
Tidewater.
Tidewater.
Tidings.
Tidings.
Tidy.
Tidy.
A tidy desk. I try to keep the garden tidy. Ellen's room is always neat and tidy. Chris is a naturally tidy person. We sold the house for a tidy sum and moved south.
Tidy your room.
It's time we tidied up the office. I'm tired of tidying up after you boys.
Let's tidy these toys away.
Tie.
Tie.
Tie this label to your suitcase.
They tied him to a tree and beat him up.
I kept all his letters tied together with a ribbon.
One of them tied her hands behind her back.
I tie my hair back when I'm jogging.
He had only a towel tied around his waist.
Can you tie your shoelaces by yourself?
She tied a scarf over her head.
She pulled the ribbon tightly and tied a bow. This dress ties at the back.
At the end of the season, we were tied with the Tigers. Woosnam and Lyle tied for 4th place on 264.
The flat is tied to the job.
Interest rates are tied to the rate of inflation. Interest rates are tied to the rate of inflation.
Many women felt tied to the house.
I didn't want to be tied to commuting to London.
With children, you're tied by school holidays.
She didn't want to be tied down by a full-time job.
Are you ready to be tied down to a wife and children? Her description tied in with that of the other witness.
How does all this tie in with their long-term aims?
The book was published to tie in with the TV series.
The intruders tied Kurt up and left him.
He tied up all the old newspapers.
I can't see you tomorrow. I'll be tied up all day.
Don't tie up the phone lines making personal calls. Protesters tied up the traffic for 3 hours today.
My money's all tied up in the house.
We'd better tie up the details with the solicitor.
The shortage of teachers is tied up with the issue of pay.
I need to tie up a few loose ends before I go on vacation. She left the dog tied up to a tree.
We tied up alongside a barge. There was a boat tied up at the jetty.
I wear a shirt and tie at work.
The importance of strong family ties.
Close ties between the two countries. Japan's strong economic ties with Taiwan.
The match ended in a tie.
England's World Cup tie against Argentina.
If you enjoy travelling, young children can be a tie.
Tiebreaker.
Tiebreaker.
Tied cottage.
Tied cottage.
Tied house.
Tied house.
Tie-dye.
Tie-dye.
Tie-in.
Tie-in.
Tie-pin.
Tie-pin.
Tier.
Tier.
The lower tier has 10,000 seats.
Terraces of olive trees rose in tiers.
A 3-tiered wedding cake.
The most senior tier of management.
The second tier of the programme is in-house training.
A 2-tier system of government.
Tie-up.
Tie-up.
IBM's tie-up with Allspec System Inc. The tie-up between class interests and politics.
Tiff.
Tiff.
Dave's had a tiff with his girlfriend.
Tiger.
Tiger.
Tiger mother.
Tiger mother.
Tight. Tight.
Tight jeans.
My shoes were so tight that I could hardly walk.
The jacket is rather a tight fit.
The bandage must be tight enough to stop the bleeding.
She tied the rope around the post and pulled it tight.
Check that the screws are tight.
His mother kept a tight hold on his hand.
The government is keeping tight control on immigration.
The former dictator still keeps a tight grip on power.
Anna was determined to keep a tight hold on her feelings.
Security is always tight for the opening day of Parliament.
Money was tight and he needed a job badly.
As you know, I run the magazine on a pretty tight budget.
Time is tight, and she has another meeting to go to this afternoon.
We should arrive on time, but it'll be tight.
As usual, his schedule on Saturday was tight.
I'm working to a very tight deadline.
6 in the car will be a tight squeeze.
Don't be so tight.
The animal's body was curled up in a tight little ball.
She wore her hair in a tight bun. Together, the young filmmakers formed a tight group.
The tight bonds that had grown between them.
Danny lost control on a tight bend and the car ran off the road.
Before she went on stage, her chest felt tight and her throat hurt.
Look, I'm sorry, she said, forcing a tight smile.
He's a good man to have around if ever you're in a tight corner.
Did something go wrong? Let's just say I got into a bit of a tight spot.
The band gave a really tight performance.
A tight, well-rehearsed production.
The opening quarter of the game was very tight. Hold tight to the handrail.
I kept my eyes tight shut.
Tighten.
Tighten.
Tighten the screws firmly.
I'd put the new tyre on, but I hadn't tightened up the wheel.
When you tighten guitar strings, the note gets higher.
The rope tightened around his body.
His mouth tightened into a thin, angry line.
Tighten up the muscles of both arms.
Rebel forces have tightened their hold on the capital.
Sarah tightened her grip on my arm. Efforts to tighten the rules have failed.
A range of measures to tighten up on illegal share dealing.
Businesses were tightening their belts and cutting jobs. Closing the border would tighten the screws on the terrorists.
He expects the presidential race to tighten.
We have tightened up the defence and are winning matches as a result.
Tight-fisted.
Tight-fisted.
Tight-fitting.
Tight-fitting.
A tight-fitting skirt.
Tight-knit.
Tight-knit.
A tight-knit island community.
Tight-lipped.
Tight-lipped.
Diplomats are remaining tight-lipped about the negotiations.
Tightly.
Tightly.
He gripped the steering wheel more tightly.
Marie held the baby tightly in her arms.
Her eyes were tightly shut. The media is tightly controlled in some countries. Tightly guarded government buildings. Caroline smiled tightly. The houses were tightly packed together.
Tightly knit.
Tightly knit.
Tightrope.
Tightrope.
I feel as though I'm walking a tightrope between success and failure.
Tights.
Tights.
Tightwad.
Tightwad.
Tigress.
Tigress.
Tikka. Tikka.
Chicken tikka.
Till.
Till.
Tilde.
Tilde.
Tile.
Tile.
Bathroom tiles.
A tiled floor.
Tiling.
Tiling.
Till.
Till.
I didn't have a boyfriend till I was 17.
The shop's open till 9 o'clock on Fridays.
You keep as much money as you need in the till to run your operations.
Tillage.
Tillage.
Tiller.
Tiller.
Tilt.
Tilt.
My mother tilted her head and smiled.
Ned's mouth tilted upwards slightly at the corners.
As it came into land, the plane tilted sideways.
The man was tilting his chair back.
Crisis situations tend to tilt the balance of power in favor of the president.
Government tax policy has tilted toward industrial development.
He charged full tilt down the slope.
A slight tilt of the head. The recent tilt towards the Democrats. The team is preparing for another tilt at the European Cup.
Timber.
Timber.
A bench made of timber.
The timber trade.
Timbered.
Timbered.
Timberland.
Timberland.
Timberline.
Timberline.
Timbre.
Timber.
Timbrel.
Timbrel.
Timbuktu.
Timbuktu.
There were enough cars to stretch from here to Timbuktu.
Time bomb.
Time.
Time.
Einstein changed the way we think about space and time.
Close relationships established over a long period of time.
Customers have only a limited amount of time to examine the goods. Their marriage got better as time went by.
What time is it? It's about 2:30.
What time are you going out tonight? Robin's just learning to tell the time.
Oh no, look at the time. I'll be late. Oh no, look at the time. I'll be late.
Is that the time? I must go. By this time tomorrow, I'll know whether I've got the job.
That was the only time we disagreed.
Do you remember the time I hit Tom Benson?
Mary had seen the film many times. It was the first time that he had lost a game.
Jerry had just had back surgery for the 3rd time in 2 years. Why don't you drop in for a drink next time you're over this way? The last time I saw Jonathan was Thursday evening. The freezing weather did not return until February, but this time we were prepared.
I missed their concert the first time round, so I'm going next week.
I meet up with Julie every time I go to Washington. How many times did you take your driving test?
How many times have I told you not to wander off like that?
One time I went to a garage sale and bought 15 books.
She was 3 months pregnant at the time of Stephen's death.
He is performing as well as any time in his career.
The UK has 500,000 stray dogs on its streets at any one time. At the time when this scheme was introduced, it was recognised that there might be problems.
The phone was ringing, but by the time she got indoors, it had stopped. Rosie, it's time to get up.
Come on, it's time for bed. He glanced at his watch. It's time for me to go.
It's time I fed the dog.
Now is the right time for us to move to London.
This might be a good time to start planning the new garden.
Now is not the time to annoy Peter. When do you want to meet? Well, there's no time like the present.
It's nearly dinner time. We empty the till each night at closing time.
Our estimated arrival time is 2:30 p.m. Our estimated arrival time is 2:30 p.m.
England is so lovely at this time of year.
We'll sort that out when the time comes. We'll sort that out when the time comes.
Dustin wanted to spend as much time as possible with his family.
I first met Jennifer a long time ago. They stopped for a short time to rest the horses. Andy and Tom talked for some time. Alison was married for a time to a comedian.
Dustin wanted to spend as much time as possible with his family.
I first met Jennifer a long time ago. They stopped for a short time to rest the horses. Andy and Tom talked for some time. Alison was married for a time to a comedian. Martin disliked being away from his family for any length of time.
It took her a long time to make a decision. Learning a language isn't easy. It takes time.
While in New York, he took time to visit some friends.
I wanted to make better use of my travel time.
I'll visit him if I have time.
Molly would like to do some diving if there is time.
She realized she would have time for a coffee before her train left.
We don't have to rush. We have all the time in the world.
June had little time to spare for making her own clothes.
He writes poetry in his spare time.
Being prepared for meetings will save time.
I don't want to waste time arguing.
She spent precious time looking for a telephone.
I seem to spend most of my time on the phone.
Macduff passed the time writing letters.
Now the children have left home, she has too much time on her hands.
Make time to talk to your children. Book your ticket soon as time is running out.
I keep practicing and I'm improving all the time.
He worries about her the whole time.
I can speak German, but we speak English most of the time.
Half the time you don't even notice what I'm wearing.
Life is hard at times.
These food safety scares happen from time to time. The police were catching the same kids stealing time after time.
Children must be supervised at all times while in the park.
Parents are welcome at all times.
9 times out of 10 she's right.
I was about 10 or 11 at the time.
At one time she wanted to be a nurse, but the thought of working at night put her off.
The president said his actions were the right ones at this time.
At no time did anyone involved speak to the press.
At no time was the company informed.
Now, for the time being, she's living with her father in Tijuana.
He has an appointment with the doctor in 2 days' time.
Will you be able to finish it in time?
They ran all the way to the corner, just in time to see the bus disappearing up the street.
The painting was successfully repaired in time for the opening of the exhibition.
We arrived at the concert hall in good time. He wants to see changes in the company, and I'm sure he will, in time.
We should arrive in New York with time to spare.
The research project will be assessed over time.
We should arrive in New York with time to spare.
The research project will be assessed over time. The research project will be assessed over time.
Students are encouraged to consider the way language changes over time.
These symptoms will start to get better with time.
I would have thought of the answer, given time.
Marie took her time cutting my hair and did it really well.
He had planned to take his time over the journey.
You're taking your time with the lab tests. We need the results now.
Sound travels 4 times faster in water than in air.
There were 3 times as many girls as boys.
If you raise your hands, I'll answer questions 1 at a time.
Frank took the stairs 2 at a time.
Because of his work, he's often away for weeks at a time.
Jack was worried about whether he'd be able to get there on time.
The plane arrived right on time. Prepare what you plan to say in the meeting ahead of time.
The train left 20 minutes behind time.
It's about time our team won.
It's high time we had a party.
Philip is going to be punished, and not before time.
He is the greatest athlete of all time, in my opinion.
We'll be there in no time.
When is she due back? Any time now.
I'll find the key eventually. It's just a question of time.
It's only a matter of time before we catch the person who killed her.
Only time will tell if the treatment has been successful.
Mankind has used the horse since ancient times.
In earlier times, servants would use the bare wooden stairs at the back of the house.
He lived at the time of the Napoleonic Wars. Air pollution has become one of the most significant health problems of our time. Our equipment is a bit behind the times.
We've got to move with the times. Coleridge was far ahead of his time in his understanding of the unconscious. This was the happiest time of her life. They had their happy times, but they had their hard times too.
Did you have a good time at the party?
Julie went to a wedding at the weekend and had the time of her life.
In her time at the United Nations, she was considered a tough negotiator.
They say he was a great actor, but that was before my time.
He seemed to grow into an old man before his time.
Eastern Standard Time.
British summertime. The flight to Boston arrives at 1:15 p.m. local time.
The Olympic medalist's time in the 200 meters final was 19.21 seconds.
The journey time to London is approximately 4 hours.
Mason's goal, 13 minutes from time, earned his team a place in the finals.
Waltzes are usually in 3/4 time.
Gloria was tapping her feet in time to the music.
Paul was doing time for burglary.
People like to pass the time of day with neighbours. Time was when no one had television.
We made good time and were at the hotel by lunchtime.
Mark was racing against time to complete the work by Friday.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Nurses in training study in their own time.
Bobby will tell them about it in his own good time.
I'd love to see it. All in good time.
He has no time for people who talk too much.
At my time of life, you can't take too many shocks like that. I've met some rude women in my time, but she's the worst.
He was many things in his time: musician, pilot, cattle rancher, industrialist, journalist.
If I had my time over again, I'd probably do exactly the same things.
It's that time of the month. I saw from the station clock that I had timed my arrival perfectly.
The tour has been timed to allow visitors to attend the opening night of the Verona opera season. Her book was timed to coincide with an exhibition of Goya's paintings at the National Gallery. The meeting has been timed for 3 o'clock. We had to run up the stairs while the sergeant timed us.
They timed the winner at 2 minutes and 14.05 seconds.
Keith timed the pass well.
A beautifully timed shot.
Time and a half.
Time and a half.
We get time and a half for working on Sunday.
Time and motion study.
Time and motion study.
Time bomb.
Time bomb.
Cutting down the rainforest is an environmental time bomb.
Time capsule.
Time capsule.
Time card.
Time card.
Time clock.
Time clock.
Time consuming.
Time consuming.
A complex and time-consuming process.
Time crunched.
Time crunched. It's hard for a time-crunched mom to fit exercise into her day.
Time delay.
Time delay. The program will be broadcast with a time delay so that rude words can be edited out.
Time frame.
Time frame.
There is a 10-year time frame for the implementation of the new policies.
Time honored.
Time honored.
Sharon became involved with music in the time-honored fashion through her family.
Timekeeper.
Timekeeper.
Time lag.
Time lag.
There is generally a 2-year time lag in the information being made available.
Time lapse.
Time lapse.
Timeless.
Timeless.
The timeless beauty of Venice.
The timeless universe.
Time limit.
Time limit.
The time limit for applications is 3 weeks.
Timeline.
Timeline.
The timeline for the project is optimistic.
Timely.
Timely.
The fight ended only with the timely arrival of the police.
We aim to settle all valid claims in a timely manner. The crash served as a timely reminder of the dangers of drinking and driving.